Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I think today it will be very interesting. I'm trying to make a jig to keep the shop nice and clean. If you have magnets in your shop, you know that they magically grab all the chips and dust they possibly can. Normally I try to avoid having magnets in my metal shop, but this time I want to take advantage of it. You probably all know these switchable magnets from your dial stands that are pretty cool. It's a pretty interesting mechanism, and I'll link you a video from Andrew where he explains this mechanism and also takes advantage of it actually for a woodworking jig. But this would be an opportunity to use this to collect the chips and let them go again. But this is way too complex for my needs. So I have a way simpler solution. The magnetic force is the biggest when the magnet directly touches the metal surface, or in my case the dust or chips. So it decreases exponential with a bigger distance. So it only has pretty high forces when I get really close to the metal. So I want to use this principle for my little jig. So the idea is to put these magnets inside of a plastic tube and build a mechanism to be able to pull the magnets away from the wall of the tubing. So as long as the magnets are touching the wall of the tube, I'll be able to collect chips with the tube. And as soon as I pull it away, the distance between the chips and the dust and the magnets is hopefully big enough so I can hold it over the bin, release the dust so it falls into the bin. Let's prove that concept. Here's the magnets, put them in the tube, the magnets facing down, and I'm trying to hold it over here. And it's collecting chips, and I try to release the magnet inside the tube. That's pretty good, I think. It's probably not ideal for big masses of chips, but for all the teeny tiny little bits that get stuck in the floor, especially in the gaps in the pavement here in the garage, I think this will be a very worthy addition to the Broom. So let's build it. So I welded this up. I had these two pieces of tube left over, and I welded a nut in between to attach the handle. The handle I want to make out of this wooden stick. I just have to figure out how to connect this wooden stick to the nut. And I cut the tube to length and printed some end caps for the tube to seal it so no chips and dust can get inside the tube, as this would be pretty tricky to clean. So now I have to somehow make an adapter between this nut and the wooden stick. And I also want to have a spring around this adapter to keep my magnets pushed against the wall of the tubing. So just if I want to release all the chips that are collected at the outside of the tube, I then can push the tubing away from the magnets to release the chips. So now I have to make the adapter between my steel rod where the magnets will attach to and the wooden stick that will also go through the wall of the tubing, and a spring that goes around this adapter. I tried to find a spring in the hardware store. They were all too small, so I have to try to make it my own. So let's go ahead and do that. So, finally, after about 3 broken tips of the insert, 1 self-ground high-speed steel tool, and several hours, my first thread on the lathe is finished. Hopefully it fits. This definitely requires some practice in future. And yay! It fits. Very nice. So I want to try to make this TIG welding rod into a spring. Therefore I set this 30mm round in the lathe up with a hole in it to stick the rod in, and I will try to hold and gate the wire with the tool holder. I will use probably some pieces of wood to clamp it in there and then try to roll this rod around the round bar. And I set the lathe to a pitch of 5mm, so I will end up with a spring with a 5mm pitch. That will be probably too small, but then I will stretch it a little bit afterwards. So let's check that out. That seems to work. So now let's try to assemble everything. Perfect. When I printed these end caps, the plan was to make these holes for the screws at the side, so that when I screw them in, the threads of the screws would just bite into the side of the tubing, so that this would help them in place. But I made the gap just a little too big, so it doesn't properly grab. So now the plan is, instead of printing this new with like 0.5 millimeter bigger diameter, I added these strips of tape of the screws to give it just a hair more friction. That should be enough to hold it in place. So hey there from the future, the video was actually already finished, but I wasn't quite perfectly happy with the fit of these with the help of the tape, as they still tend to slide out even with the screws in place. So I ended up printing 2 new of these with a slightly bigger diameter, and they will hopefully hold up just perfect in here with the screws attached. So let's mount these. So, yeah, this doesn't slip out there. Perfect. And this is the reason why it's so important that these are holding strong, because these are tiny little casters. And if the cap starts turning and one caster is up here and the other caster on the other side is at the opposite side, that doesn't make any sense. So that's why it's important that this end cap is rigidly in place. Nice. Back to the present. So I just turned these from plastic, screwed them in place. That means it's finished. So let's put this to a test. That's crazy, isn't it? That's a whole lot of dust just from like 20 centimeters of floor. Crazy! So it was definitely time to make this thing. Let's test the release of the dust. Release! This is so awesome! That's about as much as it can hold in one time. And let's try the bigger chunks. So that was underneath the lathe. This is not the first time I'm cleaning this floor. I did that with a normal broom before. But believe me, the normal broom doesn't collect half as much as this. It's so crazy. So that's it for this time. This thing seems to work. I'm very happy with how it worked out. So let me know in the comments what you would improve at this thing and if you will build it your own. So thanks for watching, see you in the next one.